Welcome to the show, everyone. You watch UAP 233. I'm John. I'm your host. Today, I got a good show for you, man. I had to kind of step back, regroup, look at this thing from a different, through a different lens after the things that went on with Sean Kirkpatrick, the Wall Street Journal article. This these tweets Matthew Brown's been putting out about Enochian language, and that's like uh, a way to speak to angels, this type of thing. Like really, John D. and brings up thoughts of Aleister Crowley and the occult. And I'm sure that the Collins elite are really, you know, these are the Christians that are high up in government that view this whole phenomenon as demonic. And I think that we might be dealing with more than one phenomenon here. So we're going to get into that today, and we're going to dive deep into that. Is there more than one phenomenon going on here? Right? I think there may be. So please stay tuned because we're gonna dive into this, and I guarantee you're gonna love the show. Stay tuned. All right. So I want to start with just let's think about Roswell. Okay. So Jesse Marcel, years afterwards, came out and said, yes, it happened. Yes, there was alien bodies. We covered a craft. And you also heard from David Grush that the first ever UFO retrieval was Magenta, Italy, and it surrounded the Italians and the Germans and that whole situation. So that right there, these facts, and I do kind of believe these people. They kind of have no, they had no horse in the game. They had no reason to lie. Especially Jesse Marcel. He was up in age. Like I said about these old men that come out and speak about these things. You know, this is a legacy that they're leaving. You know, and I don't think that they want to leave their legacy. The last memory that people have of them is telling a lie about UFOs. Are doing these interviews and telling these crazy stories about craft, beings, sciences that we don't understand. Harold Malmgren, Jesse Marcel, Philip Corso. The day after Roswell, that book, which was a bestseller. And for those of you that are just getting into ufology, I implore you to go read that book. He actually was ahead. He was the head of the Pentagon's foreign technology division. And it wasn't like foreign technology like other countries. It was foreign technology like foreign, like not of this world. And he said that all these technologies that we use today in our everyday life came from, these crash retrievals. Roswell, we're talking Kevlar, that bulletproof vest, fiber optics, the things that we use just to for me to be able to communicate with people in Australia through this microphone, these types of technologies, the integrated circuit chip and such. And we're going to get into this further because I feel like it's not only that, it's not only a physical phenomenon here, right? You look at Chris Bledsoe's experiences and you get the idea that it's more of a spiritual nature, right? And then you start like researching, and like me specifically, I started researching like philosophy, mythology, Plato's cave, things of this nature, things like archetypes, where like whenever somebody becomes a police officer, they take on this new identity, their personality kind of shifts, they become more uh, I don't want to say like authoritative, but you know what I mean. Like like when somebody becomes like a teacher, or a professor, their personality, their persona changes, right? And are these influences something more than just archetypes, right? Do we kind of create these egregores when we enter these types of professions and change these, start doing these types of deeds? Like You look at like, the way drug addicts act, and um, when you see like a beggar on the street, and I've seen people's personalities change drastically, whenever they change a profession or start entering into behaviors that they weren't doing prior to that. And then this is where I start getting into the idea that maybe it's not just a physical phenomenon. Maybe we're dealing with more than that, right? And I say that because I've experienced like very complex, layered synchronicities that have really like blown my mind away, where I had to literally step back and say, "Whoa!" It was like an ontological shock. A synchronicity of that level where you're just like blown away and you're kind of questioning everything. I want you guys to watch this clip, and I'll be right back.
What if I told you that reality is constantly trying to talk to you, but you've been trained to ignore it? Every single day, subtle messages are being placed in your path, moments too precise to be accidents. The song that plays just as you think of someone, the number that follows you everywhere, the stranger you randomly meet, who has the exact answer you were searching for. You've brushed them off as coincidences, but deep down, you've always felt there was something more. And you're right. Synchronicities are not accidents. They are messages, patterns embedded in reality itself, nudging you towards something greater. Ancient civilizations knew this. Mystics and philosophers studied it. But modern society calls it luck, chance, randomness, because the system does not want you to realize the truth.
This place just doesn't make any sense. 400,000 tons of rock excavated and moved out of here to leave behind the... So, how was this place built?
And I look at these ancient structures like this, right? And I showed you those pictures and those clips because, and there's, you know, I mean, look at these pillars, you right? They're huge, and they had to have been carved with a lathe. And this was done at a time when they didn't have that technology. And you look at like this, the Kailasa temple, like, and you see these carvings, these very intricate carvings that people or something was able to carve out of basalt rock. And I looked at the MOHS, and that's like a rating of how hard a substance is, okay? And you would have needed something like tungsten to carve that, and tungsten is used in aerospace aeronautics, like they use that stuff on like spaceships, right? It's one of the hardest metals, but we didn't have that technology until like the 1800s. Tungsten didn't even become a thing, So how did they manage to carve that huge, gigantic temple with, bridges linking two different areas of the temple, a 100-foot pillar, and the inside where the shrines and the ceilings and stuff are. And you see the vaulted ceiling. I mean, it's just a beautiful construction. Or it's not even a construction. Like they carved it out of the mountain, and scientists say that they had to have done it from the top down, right? And it's just like, and not only that, but the irrigation through that thing, how all the water, is directed. It's just amazing. And not only that, but you have the Allure caves that are connected to the Kailasa temple. And they would have had to have excavated between 200 and 400 tons of rock. And there's not even a pile anywhere of where they put the rock, right? So you look at this thing, and they said it was done, I believe, in 800 AD, right? But I feel like that's just when Western society discovered it, right? That's what I think. I think that thing has been there much, much longer. And from what I understand, the people of that land believe the same thing. And you look at these like, not only that place, but you know, Borobudur is another one. And it just boggles the mind. And I just don't understand how they were able to do that, right? And then you hear about like, I don't know if any of you guys I'm not really religious, but I went to church as a kid and I've read the Old Testament. I've read the New Testament. I mean, I've done a lot of reading in my time. I've had a lot of time on my hands where I was able to read. And in the Old Testament, there's legends about King Solomon uh, commanding demons to build the temple. Um, Now I don't know if that's accurate, um, but that's when you start getting into this aspect of, is there more to this than just what meets the eye, right? So maybe it's not all nuts and bolts. Maybe it's not alien bodies. I mean, I'm not totally discounting that based on you know the things that I've researched. I actually think that's a thing too. But what the thing I'm getting at here is, could this be a multitude of phenomena that's kind of getting all, because listen, the UFO phenomenon is much more than just lights in the sky or a flying saucer or a tetrahedron shaped, flying past a plane at 30,000 feet. This is much more than that. And I don't know if you guys understand that. Uh, the phenomenon is way more than the nuts and bolts. And I think that's what's coming out, and it's coming out slowly. You look at what Jake Barber said to Ross Cohart, and the things that he's experienced, um, when he was transporting that, he called it an egg gone. And he had this spiritual experience where he felt like the presence of this divine feminine, I don't even know what you would call it, power, a presence, but it moved him to tears while he was flying his helicopter, to the point where he didn't even know if he was going to be able to fly the helicopter, you know? And that's what I mean, right? And then I start thinking about geopolitics, okay? And I don't get into politics. I mean, look, I know about it. I know what's going on, but I don't form an opinion because anytime that I've ever took a side or had faith in one party or the other, I was always very, very disappointed in the end. And that's just how it goes. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that right now. You just look at the little feud with Elon Musk and President Trump. I mean, it's obvious Elon probably saw the inner workings of that and got the hell out of there, right? But it makes me think, has there always been an influence? These maybe some type of celestial beings interacting with humanity. Is it possible? And I mean, there's ancient texts that often describe this. Mesopotamian, Judaic, Christian traditions, not to mention the Hindu, especially Hindu. You look at the ancient Vedas and the Vimanas and these demigods flying around in the sky and these, you know, weird shaped, you know, aircraft actually going to having little battles in the sky, right? And you look like the Book of Enoch, you know what I'm saying? And the Watchers, dude. If you haven't read that, you need to read that. That's crazy. You know, where these angels were supposed to be on Earth to look after humanity, to kind of, you know, take care of us and guide us, and instead they had sex with the women, and the women bore giants. And this is when they started talking about the Nephilim and stuff. And I think that there's evidence that there were giants on the earth. Now, maybe not giants, not 30, 40 foot tall. I'm not going that far, but I'm 7, 8, 9 feet. You know, I think that that's possible. That there was probably a bloodline of beings that were that big. I mean, you just look at like Neanderthals. Neanderthals isn't a myth. We know they existed. They were muscular, dense boned, bigger heads, Some say they had bigger brains than us. Somehow they went extinct and we survived. Now, I don't know if they actually went extinct because of us. You look at the Denisovans and the things that they lived in Siberia. They found these huge um, constructions, giant blocks stacked up, and they can't really explain that. So I think these religions and a lot of them seem to rhyme with each other. There's numerous instances that you can look at examples of other religions having a Christ-like figure in that religion. So I believe that something was going on back then. I'm not sure what. And when you link it to this phenomenon, you think about John Keel and Jacques Vallée, and they speak of like ultra dimensionals. Even Hal Puthoff spoke of ultra dimensionals. I mean, so there you go. The concept of non physical entities shaping human events is deeply embedded in philosophy, right? And mysticism. And I don't think you should just discount it. And when you look at that, you have to admit that there's something else besides just flying saucers, nuts and bolts, flesh and blood aliens. I'm talking about the idea of like a hyperdimensional being, right? Not only are they able to move through dimensions like, maybe timelines, able to influence events in time, right? And I believe that. Some people might not. You might think I'm crazy, but I mean, I think I've seen enough stuff in my life to believe that. You know, you just have to pay attention. Things are weird. You just look at the world today, and if you think that does this seem normal to you? Things just seem to get weirder and weirder and weirder. And that's just the way it is. I forget the guy. He used to be this dude that used to like hang out in the jungle and eat and do ayahuasca, and he was real philosophical. And he said these things, that things are just going to get so weird that we're going to have to talk about how weird it is. I forget his name. It's eluding me now. I'll probably just see his name at the bottom of the screen while I'm talking about him. But I listen to him talk a lot, and he's a fascinating individual, and I think that he had a good grasp on where we were going, right? And I believe that especially with quantum computing and AI, it almost makes me wonder, did these multidimensional or hyperdimensional beings have they orchestrated this to lead us to create quantum computing and AI to maybe give them a greater presence in the universe, in this universe? Maybe they're from somewhere else. And maybe all this, right? Maybe they manipulated our DNA, these types of things. And I know a lot of you are going to say this dude's absolutely nuts, but am I? Go back and look at human history. Look at the just look at the buildings we were able to create in ancient history that we don't even bother to even try to create today. Sure, people say, yeah, we have cranes that could do it, but when you ask them, a lot of the engineers and stuff say, yeah, but why would we? It's just, it's not cost effective. It's not like, there's no benefit for us to do that because we chase this thing, this fictional creation of fiat money, right? It's not even backed by gold. But you look at people and we chase it. And whoever has it has the power, right? They have the influence. Who created that? Where did that come from? It's almost like some type of freaking black magic or something, right? You got somehow you were able to create this paper and made it worth something and managed to convince the planet to chase it. Now it's not even paper, it's digits on a computer. Everything's becoming digitized. And then you look at AI and there's actually AI that you can actually speak and create an app. You don't even have to literally type anything in. You don't have to know how to code, none of that. You just Tell it what you want it to do, and it'll create the app. It's there. Now, granted, it might not be. You might have to actually, like, set it so that you can talk and the words type out, but it'll do it. And this is where we're going. It's getting, and you just look at the advances in AI in the last couple of years. I mean, it's crazy right now. But I digress. I don't want to get away from the subject here. But I really think that it's possible that these entities can manipulate human perception, subtly steering the political, geopolitical, and social movements. I often wonder, like, when I see these protests spark up, what got those people all, and people automatically think that somebody's organizing these things, that there's some kind of conspiracy behind the scenes organizing these things. And I question, what if that is the case, but it's not an actual person? What would you think about that? For example, right, in recent times, and this kind of ties into 2001 and the terrible events that happened in September of that year. But it was called Project for a New American Century, and it was this paper that these neocons basically produced. And I want to get into that, right, because this kind of predicted the things that were coming. And it was almost as if the events that happened in 2001 kind of was a catalyst for a lot of the things that they wanted to do. And I feel like even today, we're still kind of going down that pathway. Although it's had some hiccups and some delays, I think we're still going towards that goal. And that's what makes me wonder, like, how is it possible that these projects are able to have a life that goes, and these long-term plans stay in effect 50, 100 years sometimes. And I just want to get into this, right? So a neoconservative think tank founded in 1997 by Bill Crystal. Oh, I didn't know that. And Robert Keegan. It was PNAC, right? Project for a New American Century, advocated for a strong U.S. global presence, promoting military strength and interventionist policies. Their statement of principles emphasize American leadership as essential for global stability. Um, One of their most discussed documents was the 2000 report, Rebuilding America's Defenses, which outlined strategies for maintaining U.S. military dominance. And one of the things that they had said was, there needs to be uh, a Pearl Harbor level event that would help them drum up support for some of the goals that they wanted to do, which was in the Middle East. And it outlines strategies for U.S. military dominance. We're talking about world, global dominance is what they wanted, full spectrum, right? And this was shaped by the Bush administration's foreign policy once he got elected, particularly regarding the Iraq War, and several these members of this think tank, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz. Isn't that strange? And they later held key positions in the Bush administration, right? And if you look at that, right, the plan wasn't only to invade Iraq, but it was basically to reshape the whole Middle East. And you saw, like, with the Arab Spring and stuff, that these things came to pass, right? And a lot of these things couldn't have happened without the events that happened in September of 2001. And then you look at the things that happened on that day, and you look at, like, Building 7, and I'm going to tell you, that day, that was whenever my reality kind of cracked, right? That and that event and the years afterwards, when I learned kind of what happened, and how some of the things that were alleged to have happened that day couldn't have possibly happened the way that they said. And then you looked at that commission, and it kind of like it rhymed with the Warren Commission because it was all just a whitewash. And it just makes me wonder, man. You know, I don't think that George Bush Jr., I don't think George W. was smart enough to pull off that himself. And that's what makes me think that these advisors are the ones that are really in control. You know, the Paul Wolfowitzes, the Bill Crystals, these are the ones that kind of not and it might not even be those men, right? I may be wrong, but I know that these unelected officials are the ones that really wield the power, at least in American government. Um, are they possibly influenced by something nefarious, something not of this world? And this is what I mean about the UFO subject being much bigger than just craft in the sky. I think there is a force, there is a some people today think that the world is controlled by demonic entities, and they think that pop culture and the things that we see on TV and just the entertainment and the things that are being pushed on us through Hollywood, is evil. A lot of it is hypersexualized, do anything, step on anybody to get ahead, all about trying to have money, and this is what the kids grow up seeing. And it makes me wonder if the world isn't influenced by some kind of non-human entity or entities that are jockeying for control. And maybe we're just instruments of their proxy wars. I want to know what you guys think about this. Please hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think, man. Share it to a friend, share it to two friends. I'll see you tomorrow.